go.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going good.
Good man. Should I get my guitar? Should I go in my other room with my axe or?
Yeah, if you're down. If you're
All
down.
right. Yeah, yeah. Let me call you right back, or I'll I'll just run upstairs because my guitar's in my other room, so I'll just go up there real quick.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I'll just stay on. No
All
worries.
right, 1 second.
Yo. Well, that's good, bro.
There we go. How's that?
It's perfect.
Cool, and you can see me and everything. I got a better camera too, so.
Yeah. Hey, Telly. That's the guitar I think of whenever I think of you.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, this is my Cane Top Tele. Yeah. Um, this is my second one. I have two of them. One's really old.
Right on.
One's like what? Yeah, one of his very first ones he ever made. I think it was the very first or second electric he ever made. Second one.
Damn.
And this one was made like 2 or 3 years ago, so a little bit newer. But
Mm,
yeah, I like them, man. They're fun.
cool.
Yeah.
Right on. I got this
Cool.
I got this Ibanez. I just got it. It was like $500.
Nice. Is it Art Star or Artcore? What are they called now?
Yeah, it's the Artcore. I don't know, it doesn't say in here. It's the ASV, I guess. You know, they all have those silly names.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I played a couple other guitars. I had like $500. This one played better than the Telly that I played, so I was like, and on the bridge pickup, it's pretty bright, you know.
So how did you switch that? Did you switch it with by hitting it, or did you have to turn it? Oh, you flipped it. Because I used to have an old Ibanez
Mm,
from the early '80s. I had a couple of them. I had a '78 Artist, like a lawsuit one that was really nice,
okay.
and then I had like an '81. It was like an SG, like a double cutaway, but it looked like an SG almost.
Cool.
Ibanez, and it had a thing where if you hit the volume knob, it would double the volume. So if you're playing lead or rhythm, you could have the volume on full for
Yeah.
your chords and for your soloing. And when you had your chords, you just had it out, so it was half the volume, but still had a full tone. And
Weird.
then you would just hit it, and
Cool.
it would double it, so you could do your lead and still have like really good tone. It was an interesting guitar. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just had like a shitty guitar situation, and I wanted one guitar that worked. And I live in Colorado, and I think you play a lot of guitars I hear, and they're just like really shitty because of the weather. They're just like not taken care of very well.
Oh, yeah.
Every Ibanez I've played since I've been here has been like pretty functioning. You know, like you pick it up and you're like, it works. The action's nice. It stays in tune. Like, so that was kind of the reason I never thought that I would necessarily want to have a guitar. But now I'm like, just about it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of guitars. I mean, I have two of the cane tops, but I just play this one, and the other one's basically like a reserve. So if I ever have to bring this, like I bring it in about twice a year here for setups, because right now it's like 10% humidity in Arizona, and like in June it'll get down to 3%. So at that point, I have to bring it in and get it set up so that it doesn't, move around too much. But when I bring it in, I just use the Eric cane top for a week or two while it's in the shop. Other than that, I only really have two playing guitars, and I have one 66 Telly that
Sick.
It's really nice. It's got new pickups put in and a new, not new, whatever, tuning pegs and stuff. But yeah, all the hardware is basically new, but the wood's the same from back then. I don't really ever play that guitar. Yeah.
I've had to replace a lot of hardware throughout my days. I don't know, just that's kind of wears. It's like it would be crazy if the original hardware would be on there. If you like you actually gig and you actually use the guitar, maybe you teach every day or you play every day, even you don't have to gig, but like you just use it every day. Like they're not going to work very well after a while.
No, especially here because like the tuning pegs dry out, all the oil dries out, and you can put more oil in all the time, and then it just wears out. And of course, nuts wear down over time. Even the new ones. This one's, I don't know whatever this is now, plastic or something. I don't know. It's some sort of polycarbonate. I did have some old guitars. That I believe it was ebony or it was ivory on there or something, or some sort of like
bone or something.
Yeah, bone probably. Yeah, so it's probably bone. It was whatever they used before plastic, yeah. Yeah. So before plastic, it's not really old. Before plastic was invented, that's what they used on the guitar. But this one's just all brand new. Yeah, or it's like a few years old, but everything is new.
What dude, I'm just curious. I mean, I've been a fan for years and years. I remember.
Oh, thanks, man.
Dude, second off, I tell it literally every single student I've ever had since I was probably 18 years old, and I'm 26 now, to download your PDF book.
Oh, cool.
I am such a fan. I remember reading that right before I went into school for music, and I was like, I don't know, I probably would have failed horribly had I not had that.
Oh, that's good.
I really needed those drop 2 and 3 chords for the guitar. I really needed the scales. I really needed the modes. Like that was like pretty much like prerequisite shit that I needed to know. And I was like, dude, this is amazing. I remember actually hitting you up for a lesson, and you were like, you should just download my book and like there. And I was like, right on, I'll do that. And I was like so thankful. But still to this day, I mean, literally like 8 years later, I still tell people like,
oh, thanks, man.
This book, it's so fucking worth it. And like, if you actually care to read, and it's kind of lengthy. It's not like 4 pages or something, but like you go pretty deep. And I'm trying to follow in your footsteps and write my own guitar book. And I was curious.
Oh, nice.
What did you use, like technology-wise, to make those diagrams and like everything like that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty simple on technology. So I use 3 main programs on my computer. Okay. I just use Microsoft Word for all the writing and editing and formatting, and then I save it to a PDF from Microsoft Word. Okay. But if you don't want to use that, you can always use OpenOffice or Google Docs or anything. Just some sort of word processor. Yeah. I like Word. It's fine. And then I use neck diagrams, which is like probably $30 now. I think I paid $20 for it 5 or 6 years ago.
Noel Johnson told me about that.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
He's the North Texas.
Yeah, he's down in Dallas. Around there. Yeah, Fort Worth. Yeah. He's a great player, and it's a great program. It's super easy. You just move the dots around, and you can have all your cool diagrams and stuff. And so I use that, and then I use Sibelius for notation and tab. And
I need to get something like that. I think I have MuseScore somewhere on my computer.
Okay.
That.
Well, I used, yeah, I mean, I bought Sibelius the first time as a student when it was like $800 for students or something, or it was like so expensive back in the day. It might have been $500 with a student discount or something, but it was still like, it was the most expensive thing I ever bought besides a guitar in music, was Sibelius. And then now, you know, I updated my MacBook last year, or yeah, just late last year. I bought a new one finally. My old one was like 8 years old, so I got a new one. And they don't have discs anymore. I don't have my installed discs for Sibelius, so I had to upgrade.
Jack and a charger. That's all I got on mine.
Yeah, and so I couldn't use those discs or anything, and so I was like, well, I'll just download. And I was getting ready to like bite the bullet and spend $800 more on it, and then luckily that now they have a subscription where it's like $20 a month, and I'm sure over 8 or 10 years I'll spend more on that than I would if I just bought it outright.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's $800 or $900 up front.
True.
You know, and they've been really good. They go, you know, like they're like any online sort of program. Sometimes I'll get up in the morning and I'll try to go work on something and I can't log in or their server's down for a few minutes, but they always fix it really quick. It's only happened a few times. So yeah, so that's very reliable. But that's the only three things I use is Sibelius for tab and notation, and then I use neck diagrams for all my diagrams, and then I just put all into Word, and I do that. But that's yeah. And then for all the audio stuff, I use Band in a Box to create the backing tracks.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so Band in a Box is a really cool program. It's actually done by, he's a brother of a really famous jazz guitarist out in Vancouver. And I think the brother is the software designer, and then the other brother plays, so the one brother designs software and the other brother plays guitar. And so they built this program many years ago, and basically you put in the chords, and it used to be MIDI, and it would just kind of play kind of like iReal Pro or iReal B, if you've ever seen that one. Yeah, but then they really upgraded it, and they got it kind of too upgraded for a while, but they toned it down because there's all this recording, mixing, and mastering software in there and all this kind of stuff. But they kind of took that out for if you don't want it. But they use all real instruments. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, like they've sampled, like literally brought them into the studio and sampled them. Like Ron Carter, Mike Moreno plays a lot of the guitar. Brent Mason plays a lot of the country stuff and rockabilly, which is amazing. So you could just like create a solo, and it's Brent Mason playing a solo, or Ron Carter or whoever you want. And then so it's real instruments, which is nice, and they swing better than MIDI.
Yeah.
And the other thing I like is you can actually just click a button, and it flips the screen and it'll show you like all the guitar notes. So if you put a Pat Martino solo, you can listen to it and comp along to it to practice comping, and then you can flip the screen and you can actually play all the lines, all the Martino lines, and they're like, his best lines, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, so Band in a Box works really well.
Wow. Yeah, man, dude, that's pretty crazy. That's cool.
Yeah. It's just those 4 programs, and then the only other one I really use is to record my audio, and that's is free with my Mac, is GarageBand.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of splurged on that a little bit, but I still I have like the world's cheapest interface, and I don't so I just use like whatever, all the little lamps in there and stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for my interface. I just used it the other day. I think I probably put it away in a drawer. But yeah, I have a little Behringer, like $100 interface, and it works great.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't spend a lot of money.
And yeah, I was talking about that earlier too. I use a really shitty interface, but still people comment are like, the quality's so good, and I'm like, it's not though. Like, I think it's more about the music and the take, and if you know a little bit about mixing and like all your levels are good and shit and you can hear you, it's like most people can't really tell the difference between like a $2,000 interface and like a $24 interface or whatever. So.
No. And if you go on YouTube and you listen to music, or you go on, I guess Spotify is different, that's more high quality, but a lot of the time people just listen to handheld videos on their phone. So it's someone like put a phone in front of them, played into their phone, and that's what the recording is. So they're used to camera audio, or just whatever audio they get.
And I don't know. Another thing I was kind of thinking about, why I specifically asked if you'd be willing to do this, was man, are you so thankful that you got into this education game 10 years ago or however long? Were you in a position where you were gigging a lot and that was a huge income for you? Or are you teaching in a school or something? Or I don't know anything about that.
Oh, I don't do anything now, but except for run my online business. so I did do a lot of touring and playing and gigging and stuff for many years, and I got tired of traveling around and not making a lot of money and
Yeah.
being sick all the time and in airports and hotels. And yeah, it was okay. And it just, or even just local gigs like shipping gear for an hour, setting up, playing for 3 or 4 hours, making $100 and then tearing down and then going home and getting home at 2, 3 in the morning. It's just not, it wasn't for me. I'm not saying it's not for everyone. I mean, I there's definitely 20 years where I loved doing that. It's just after a long time, it just became a little bit much. I just needed a break. I'm not sort of stopping that part of my life permanently. Just I wanted to focus on this for a while.
Absolutely.
And I used to teach at universities and stuff, and then I quit that in 2015. I think the fall of 2015 was when I stopped teaching. Yeah, at the university. So it's been almost 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've just I taught Skype for a long time. I did a lot of Skype lessons and wrote some books. And then about a year ago,
That's when I
yeah. So that would have been when I started writing books and doing Skype. That would have been in 2011.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so that would have been like I was still teaching and I was living in Brazil and I was touring and playing and stuff, and I had university jobs, and it took about 4 years to kind of get rid of that and just work on my own thing. So even in 2015, I was still doing gigs and teaching workshops live, and then I would have a couple students come to the house at the most, and then everything else was on Skype. I was teaching 50, 60 hours a week on Skype.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a lot of Skype. Yeah, so it's funny now because everyone's sort of scrambling to learn how to use Zoom and Skype and Google Hangouts and all these, sort of video technology. And I'm just like, well, I've been doing this for 9 years. I mean, this has been my life, is sitting in front of a screen teaching.
That was definitely why I wanted to reach out to you, because I was like, this is the guy who's been doing it before everyone, man. Like, I don't know. I don't have like a huge following. I maybe have like 2,000 people on my band, and
that's great, man.
Facebook, or probably the same on Instagram or something. But yeah, it's like, I'm not like huge, but by any means, it's just like, I thought you would be a great resource for people to learn from, because I was just like, man, this guy has literally been doing what everyone's trying to do
now. Yeah, and what's funny is like I've been doing it I just do video courses now. I have a new site with it's like MWG courses, and we have some free courses, video courses, and we have some paid ones. We have a membership. It's kind of the standard layout for it. Yeah, so we got that going about a year ago.
Kind of like the Sound Slice thing. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I don't use Sound Slice.
That's something like you're releasing courses kind of thing.
Yeah, but I'm releasing courses. Yeah, so for example, we just released a new course this week on jazz blues. And so it's like a study guide. So there's like a mixture of like PDFs and audio and backing tracks and video, and it's all like multimedia. There's quizzes and stuff. And
wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of neat. So we've been doing that for like a year, and we were like really gearing up, kind of turning off the ebooks because they're getting a little bit old. People like ebooks, but they're so used to YouTube and Facebook and stuff. Everything's video, and it's much more interactive or live or whatever.
So would you say that you get a bigger return or more interaction on the videos than you do the book?
Yeah, I get much more interaction because in the like in the courses and stuff with the videos, I'll post an exercise of like solo with this like major to minor concept on a blues, and so here's the exercise and here's the PDF and here's my video, and I'll demonstrate it and I'll teach it, and then people can ask questions. They can even post videos to YouTube and share the link, and I can give them feedback directly on their playing, and so that's much more interactive than with the books. Which people ask questions on the books, but it was a different layout, and it wasn't so.
Yeah, and the questions are like specific, like at whatever minute 251 or whatever, you click, and can you talk about this or whatever this thing you're doing, and that's like so much more specific than like just the book, and in general, like you're saying. I mean, that's so much more initiative for people to even create content too. That's like kind of it.
Oh, sure, exactly, yeah, and it's much more of a community, because then like someone posts something and then someone will comment below it, and it's all kind of kept there. And so people who might try the course like 2 years from now are going to see all the old comments, and they can interact with people, and they can see all the old videos and stuff, and they can add their own videos. So I've been doing that for about a year, and it's funny because it was a little bit slow for like the past 6 months because we were sort of turning off the ebooks and turning on the courses, and even
stuff up anyways. Like if you're starting a new channel or like whatever.
Oh yeah.
lull of like, you know, trying to get your other followers onto this new platform, I think.
Yeah, we thought it would be easy. We just thought like, oh, we'll just turn the ebooks off, turn the courses on, and people will just all shift over. And they didn't. It took some time, and so we realized that even though people have been asking me for videos, I mean, I would get emails like 5 or 6 a week, every single week for years. People saying, "Can you do video courses? Can you do courses?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, well, that's the right time." But I didn't want to do it on my own because I don't know nothing about video. You know, like if you notice when I mentioned like all the stuff that I use, I don't use any video editing, so I don't know anything about video.
That's why I like this, because you can just record it and just post it. Like,
yeah, I said like it's super easy. Yeah, so for the courses, I want to do something that was, you know, when I was ready to do courses, or I knew I would be ready to do my courses when I could afford to hire someone to come in who's a professional videographer and do all the filming, the lighting, the editing. So it's kind of hard to see over here, but you'll see there's like a bunch of lights and camera stands and stuff. And this is the we film everything in all the courses. Okay. You will have three cameras set up. We have one on my face and one on each of my hands. And then we have all the audio done. I would direct with my guitar, and I've got like a nice like mic that I use to talk into, and she's mixing and everything. And yeah, so Zaskia is my videographer, and she's amazing, and she does amazing work. And so I've always, you know, I wanted to do videos for a long time, and people were asking for them. I just didn't want to do it. You know, like I just want to do it at the highest quality I could. And so he's sitting around editing and stuff would have been like, well, for a YouTube video, it's fine, but for a paid course, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. So I waited until I could hire someone. And
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. In general, I commend you for that. That's like just the first thing that comes to mind, like you hiring a video person to do it, is that you really have to have your shit together. Like,
yeah,
you have to have like all the lessons planned out, like all of
the you should see my like I have you here, and then behind you is my desktop, and it's just full of folders of courses we have coming up. There's at least 20 courses on my desktop that I have to write in the next little while.
That's just the first thing that came into my head. I was like, man, for you to hire someone, because I would feel more comfortable doing it on my own, like getting a nice camera, BSing my way through Final Cut or something like that, and like, you know, only for the sole purpose of like, I just don't have the lesson plans written right now, and the whole funding thing is kind of an obstacle as of the corona. But
yeah,
I'm on the exact opposite spectrum of you, where I stopped teaching because I had so many gigs, and I was like, I just don't care about this. And then now I'm like, damn it, I should have kept teaching. Like, you know, so I'm trying to and it's yeah, I mean, as is everyone.
It's tricky. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, and it's tough because like when I did it, it was more a matter of people were afraid of the technology. So, or they were shy about the technology. So in 2011, yeah, like I was like, you know,
the computer, like, no, get the hell out of here. I'm not gonna do that, you know.
I know. Yeah, and what's really funny,
you know, that's crazy.
Oh, I know. Exactly. So people would like email me and be like, well, I'm not sure. Can I just pay for one lesson and try it? And even back in 2011, like I was living in Brazil. I had the fastest internet in the country in Brazil I could get. And it was, I mean, like 1 megabyte upload or something or download. It was so slow. Yeah. So I could barely do Skype. So I was like, okay, well, I would try it, and I would try it with people, and they would say, okay, well, I'll try it. And after like literally the first 30 seconds or a minute, once they realized what it was and how easy it was, as a student, they were like, I'm in, you know, can I buy 4 lessons? Can I buy a pack of 10 or whatever? Like I never had anybody stop lessons because they didn't like the technology. Everyone thought it was much easier than they had thought.
Totally. It's a different lesson too. I think it makes you think way more.
Yeah, and you have to, as a teacher, it's a much different skill set. So for example, I had students who I never saw their face, and I taught them for 3 or 4 years because they just would come on and the camera would be on their guitar, and they would talk, and I would talk to them, but they just had the camera on their guitar. And so I actually never saw their face in like 3 or 4 years. And I had other students who liked to have the camera on their face. And so then when they were playing, I had to learn how to like hear mistakes, but not just note mistakes, but like, oh, they're hooking their thumb. What does that sound like? Yeah. Or, you know, they're pushing down too hard. What does that sound like? Or they're not pushing, you know, it's things that you would see pretty easily if you were looking and hearing at the same time. Like your brain would recognize, I'm hearing this, I see that, it's this problem. But it takes a long time to figure that out when you can't always see, or you can't always hear very well, or there's, you know, it's kind of like back and forth. So that took some adjusting for me, but I've, you know,
I get that totally.
yeah. So my problem was a little bit different, is that people didn't trust the technology. And so there wasn't a lot of people out there who were trying it as far as Skype lessons, one-on-one lessons. And so it was really a hard time to convince people to try. But once they did, it was like, oh, this is cool. So the problem now for someone like you is, like you were saying, it's like almost the opposite. It's like everyone's willing to try as far as teachers. There's lots of students out there, but it's like everyone's doing this at once. So how do you find your 20 students a week or so to keep things going?
Yeah.
The positive that I see about all this stuff, because this is a huge negative. There's not a lot of silver lining to this. I mean, at least not yet. There's a lot of people dying and getting very sick, and of course the economy is shut, and people are losing their jobs and stuff. The one positive that I can already start to see that's giving me some hope about this stuff is, like, there's a big interruption in our world and in our economy and in our lives, and it's going to change how we do everything going forward. Absolutely. And yeah, and as someone who's been doing this for 9 or 10 years, I've seen this slow movement from like in-person lessons to teaching online, and it's been very slow. And the one positive about this is it's just like, it's done. So you either work online now or you might not survive as a teacher, right? So it's kind of like, it's just forced everyone to do it. So it's going to just bring a lot of students online. It's going to give a lot of like local guitar teachers who were suffering from YouTube videos and, courses and stuff online because they were competing. Now they can just teach online at home to their local students and teach kids and teach people who are beginners and teach adults and teach whoever. And they don't have to leave their house. They don't have to give half their money to a school necessarily. They might, because they might be going through it like a school to find the students. But I mean, not giving half of your money away to a school is a big positive for many guitar teachers, especially if they're only making $15, $20 a lesson. If you're making 30 or 40, that's a big difference for a lot of people. So I'm hoping that's the positive, is that everyone, the students will go online because they have to, the teachers will go online because they have to. And when this is over, there'll be some sort of middle ground, or we'll probably stick more to the online stuff.
I think so. I think every business in general, not just teaching. I mean, I think people are, like, they're so like, just unprepared for this, I guess, maybe where it's like they don't even know what's really going on, and everyone's like, like my roommate, he's like an engineer, and he's having to work from home now, and it's like,
how do you do that?
Like they had to figure all this shit out, like, and his girlfriend's like medical billing, and she's like having to work from home now, and it's just like, my girlfriend is a cello player. She, went to school and did all this stuff, and now everything's online, and music and arts is closed.
Oh, he see my dog. There he is. I couldn't see. Yeah. He makes an appearance in all my courses and videos at some point. I have 2 dogs, and they always sort of sleep at my feet, or they jump around or whatever. This is Stevie. He's named after Stevie Ray Vaughan. So cool. That's him. Yeah, and he's getting close to his WALK time, so he's getting excited. Yeah, that's it. But even like, it's funny, but even stuff like dog training is going online. I mean, just all sorts of stuff. Exactly. We're gonna get a GoPro on his head so he can run around, and they'll like sync that with like the camera at the dog training.
Yeah, I was watching some music video, I forgot, but it was just like some nature video. It's like people are just doing whatever now because they can't go outside.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's it's not a great time. I mean, for people,
it's the blessing for me. In general, I'm super thankful that I have like an hour to spare to talk to you. I'm super thankful that I'm recording a new album right now.
So you're being very productive, or being very creative in this kind of time,
Yeah, absolutely. And, just really, really trying to reach out to people. I'm really trying to create a community in places that, like, I can only go on foot around here, really. So it's like I'm reaching out to people all over the place now. And, I'm learning how to play the mandolin. I'm trying to learn fifth tuning. That's super hella confusing. And that's fun. I'm trying to learn how to play an open C, like, I got
different things.
Yeah, and I'm working on singing a lot, and just trying to be productive. I got a merch store going. I get shirts and coffee mugs and whatever, phone cases and tote bags and sweaters, and just trying to make.
And it's all cool, man, because when this ends, it's not like you wasted your time. Like
Totally.
you'll still have your online store. You'll have some Skype students by then. You'll have
Yeah.
other things, like this stuff will all start to build. And by the time this is over, I think people like you and, I mean, this is kind of what I did for years about people in this area, and people like you said, in any job are just going to say, well, I don't want to go back to the old way because this is easier and
Yeah.
it's more efficient and it's cheaper, and I'm just going to do this.
Totally.
So what you're doing now is very productive. And I think a lot of people are doing that kind of stuff is they're just creating new habits.
Yeah.
And then once this is over, those habits will stay, whether it's playing guitar for an hour a day or, like, for example, you talk about the engineer friend of yours who's working from home. It's like, well, people who do other things but play guitar on the side, if they don't have to spend 2 hours a day in traffic, so an hour there, an hour back, which is what the average in the US. Like my wife, we live in Tucson, which isn't that big. It's like 1.5 million people, and she still goes 45 minutes each way.
Wow.
So if people have that extra time, because they can work from home now, they're not commuting. Well, that's an extra hour they can play guitar, or 2 hours they can play guitar every day, or they can learn a language and play guitar, or they can do karate or yoga or take up a basketball or something. I mean, anything. But now they have an extra couple hours a day.
Sure.
I think that.
I go so far.
Oh yeah, and I think that's going to be really hard to take back. It's not necessarily like working in an office that people will miss or whatever. I think when this is over, people who can, because people who work in restaurants can't work from home, but people who are engineers, or if they can work from home at least part of the week, it's going to be hard to take that back, because it's going to be like, well, you're not just taking my hours away, or make me drive into work. You're taking my practice hours away on guitar. You're taking my basketball hours away. You're taking my extra hour with my kid at night, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a big deal for people, because that was my thing. It's like, I used to commute when I lived in Illinois. I lived in Champaign. I went to school there, which is like in the center of the state, just south of Chicago.
I've seen it on the map.
Yeah, it's like right in the middle of the state. So I lived there because I was going to school there. My wife was going to school there, and I had a TA there, so I do my doctorate and stuff. So I taught there, but I would drive 3 hours out west to teach at a school in Macomb on the border of Iowa and just north of St. Louis, like a few hours north of St. Louis. Yeah, so it was like I would drive there like Tuesday. I would drive in the morning for 3 hours, teach for 10 hours, and then drive home for 3 hours. And then I do that on Thursday. And I did that for 3 years. And then my last 3 years there, I went over on Tuesday and just came. I did only one round trip a week, but there was 3 years of 2 round trips a week. And nowadays I would have taken that job in a second, but I would have said, like, I'm not driving over. I'm not living there because it's too far from my other stuff, my school, and my wife is here and stuff. But let's just do it online. I'll just do Skype, because it was all just one lesson. It was just teaching guitar lessons. Let's just do it on Skype. I'm sure any university would want to do that, at least nowadays. Sure. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing too, because I actually had some discussions with universities like almost 7 years ago, probably 2012, 2013. Yeah. And I was talking to some universities to help them develop, because they were in smaller places like West Virginia and the Carolinas, but like not in the big cities. And they were kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, we can't compete with people. So like, if they want to hire a jazz guitar teacher to teach 10 lessons because they have 10 students, they have to convince someone to drive 3 hours from the closest city. So what I was working with them on was a platform like this. And it never got off the ground because they never got the budget, because people didn't think it was worth it. But now I bet they are. And that's to like, so if you're in, say, like if you're in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia or Nebraska or somewhere, and the closest big city is 3 hours away, that university could hire like Mike Stern to do the guitar lessons. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason why they can't.
And dude, speaking, I forgot who said, man, it was like 2 seconds ago, whatever. But we were talking about just old people playing guitar. And that video of John Schofield that he just put out, and he's like, I'm retiring. Like, COVID is, ruined me, and I'm taking my last chance. And it's like, damn, like we're losing. Oh, Pat Martino, that's what you're saying. And
because he's got some health issues. Yeah.
True. And he's been super vocal about that as of recently. And then, it's like, dude, there's the list of jazz musicians that are in poor health right now is probably too long to name. And
it's one of the saddest things for me is when like someone will post something on Facebook and I'm like, oh, well, who needs money now? Yeah. It's like some sick jazz musician who's got a health issue who doesn't have the money or the health coverage, and you're like, wow, this is what a terrible situation to be in. You know, like I've given to every one of them, Kenny Burrell, Pat Martino, whoever, and they just like, they just pop up and I'm just like, well, I'll give it, you know, whatever I can and spread the word.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, there's a better solution to that now. I think we've all realized. I mean, if Pat Martino is sick and he can't leave his house, maybe he can get on there and like the Philadelphia School of the Arts can have him do a live workshop from his house where he just talks or he plays a little bit. You know, maybe his health isn't at that state. I'm just sort of spitballing here, but someone who's maybe, you know, or even like famous players like who live in New York, live in very, you know, very expensive cities. Even a very famous jazz musician isn't killing it, you know, in New York because they're spending so much money on rent and travel and all that kind of stuff. You know, they could be living in, you know, whatever, like a smaller town that's more affordable, and they could be Skyping in or Zooming in to like NYU, Manhattan School of Music, and doing lessons that way. Yeah, like one-on-one workshops, even combos. I mean, so I'm hoping that that's another side effect of this, is that we're going to see less of those older jazz musicians or older musicians in general who are struggling because maybe when they get to a point where they don't want to tour anymore, they can't tour as much, they can go into teaching. And what they would normally do is they would teach at a local university or conservatory. That seems to be, you know, what they've done in the past. Those people, nowadays, they could, I mean, even whoever, I mean, like they can get a job, they could be living in Denver or somewhere more affordable and be teaching at NYU or Juilliard, right? And I think that provides a higher, yeah, and it should hopefully provide a higher, like more opportunities for people to keep working and give people like healthcare benefits, more income, more steady income, especially as they get into their older years as musicians. And I think that will I'm hoping that will help prevent seeing so many, you know, GoFundMe's every month, whatever, on Facebook with like people who are sick.
Even before this, I agree with that. Just the list, it just was like, man, it was like this person, this person, and this person. It's like, damn, you know?
Yeah, and then we're going to see it a lot more now, I think. And I mean, like Vic Juris just passed away, but he was. I don't think he did a GoFundMe because he had. I'm guessing because he did teach full time or at least close to full time through a few different schools. I think he was a little bit more stable. I didn't see a GoFundMe for him, but maybe I missed it, or maybe I saw it and gave and forgot because there were so many. But someone like Vic Juris he was very vocal for many years. There was this old, I don't know if they still have it, there was a forum on the All About Jazz website, and he would go in and comment once in a while on, you know, what the reality is for a jazz musician living. And, you know, he was like, look, I play out with David Liebman, I play all these famous people, I do all these gigs. Yeah, he was unbelievable. And he would also, you know, he would say like, I'm teaching here part-time and there part-time. And there are some months where I had trouble with my mortgage.
Wow.
And he was like super honest. I was like one of the few people I've ever seen be so honest about like what this life is like. Like, you know, I mean, I just bought my first house at like I was 39 years old. You know, I mean, before I bought my house, I mean, my biggest apartment was probably like 600 square feet or something. I mean, like we lived in like, I mean, when I lived in Brazil, it was 200 square feet, you know, I mean, like we lived in tiny places. Even when I had a lot of students, there's a lot of student loans to pay off and a lot of bills. And yeah, so it was refreshing for me as a younger person to hear and read Vic talk about that kind of stuff, about the struggle he had.
Like, I mean, talk about kind of like the pedestal we put these people on. It's like, I mean, the dude, like you're saying, taught at universities. He had like books that were about like Hal Leonard and like, you know, like published in like actual feasible things. He taught master classes. He played with everybody and their mom, like, and was on recordings. And I don't know, that's a great example of somebody who is just a fabulous player. And I mean, even I would think was pretty successful. But still, I mean, that's wild.
Yeah, but there's still ups and downs because tours would get canceled or classes would get canceled, and you would, you know, money that you thought was coming in wasn't. And you know, and actually, the reason that I do all this stuff now is because of Vic. Because in 2012, I was living in the UK and I flew over to Ottawa, Canada, to do a workshop, to do a festival. So I played at the festival. I actually got to open up for Ben Monder, which was really fun. Ben's like my guitar hero. He's like, I mean, I love Ben. He's a super cool human being, and he's just an amazing guitarist. I got to like warm up the crowd for him, and then he went out, and it was like I got to watch him on the side of the stage. It was really cool. I had seen him as a kid growing up in bars and stuff, and yeah, that was really fun. But Vic Juris was the sort of big name, and I stayed at my old teacher's house, Roddy Elias's house, and I stayed downstairs and they stayed upstairs.
Yeah.
So every morning we'd have coffee together and we would talk and stuff. And like the first second I met him, he like turned to me and we were in the car and he was in the front seat. I was in the back seat. They picked me up at the airport and he was like, man, I don't know if you're teaching somewhere, but you have to quit and just teach online. I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, man, I've seen a lot of stuff, because he was like a fan, right? And he studied my lessons, and that was the most humbling thing I've ever heard anyone say. Like it's humbling when I hear you say it. It's not any different when I hear him say that they enjoy my lessons. But at the time when I was just starting out, it was like this huge shot in the arm,
Totally.
And so, and he was like, man, do DVDs, do video courses, do anything, because you have a talent for breaking this stuff down and teaching it. Don't lose that, and he was like, don't deal with the bureaucracy or the red tape or the low pay or whatever it is of like teaching part-time at a school. Just don't bother, go out and do this.
I mean, he's saying that from, years of experience at that point, hitting the pavement. He's like, bro, you got to figure it out. Just run. Just
I know. And I was just like, oh, maybe I should. And I think I taught part-time for a couple more years, but I had gone down to part-time at that point. But as soon as he told me that, my goal was like, I need to get out of this and just do that. And then once I got out of the school system, it was, I was teaching a lot of Skype lessons, which I really liked, but I was like, well, I can't reach that many people. And I really want to reach a lot of, one of my main goals, reach a lot of people, excuse me. And so Skype, I can do, I could teach 60 or 70 hours a week, which I was doing for a long time, but it was still like, it was killing me because I was teaching every day for 10 hours, whatever.
That's draining as well.
Oh yeah, it just killed me mentally, physically, my mental health wasn't great. It was just a tough time. And then so,
I've only done that like 1 or 2 times, and I was teaching at a school, and I was like working over full time, and I was like, dude, I didn't play the guitar at all. It was like, there's nothing more uninspiring to me than just like explaining how to play like Happy Birthday or something, for lack of a better example, like over and over again, and then it's just like, oh, I need to get home and like create something. Like, no way. So,
yeah, it's mentally draining. Yeah. And I love teaching, so I knew that was a trade-off. And so, when I got to that point when I was teaching, like, 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, I was like, this is where I want to put my focus. Because at that time, I had a lot of student loan debt. I mean, I'd gone through my doctorate, so I spent 12 years at university, and I went to some very expensive schools, and I had a lot of debt. And so I was like, okay, I actually I had to pay off that debt. And so I was working a lot and teaching a lot. But my ultimate goal was to get to where I am now. And it's only been in the last 2 or 3 months that it's really, I've felt like, okay, I feel stable. Even like the last 2 months, it's like, now we finally, okay, now I can just do just the courses. Yeah. I don't teach one-on-one. I have my Facebook group and I do other things that's to reach multiple people, like, trying to reach as many people as possible. But it took me 9 years to go from being a full-time professor to being just a full-time person who like films courses and doesn't do one-on-ones. But that was like probably 8 years of knowing in my head that that's what I wanted to get to, and working like every single day as hard as I could to get there. Wow. So when I see all the stuff happening now with people, what's funny is it's like, wow, like because all this stuff happened, it basically took that 8-year period of what I went through and it just squished it down to like 8 hours for a lot of people. It was like, you don't have time to do this on the weekends. You have to do this like immediately. You have to figure out how to get online and get teaching online and get playing online, or, sell your records or sell your merch or your teaching, but people have to figure it out now. And it's that urgency that I think it sucks that it came through such a terrible event of everyone getting sick and people dying. Minus that from the teaching, if I'm just looking at the teaching perspective of it and I'm not looking at the human cost, it's like, well, that's a great thing to happen because it's going to help a lot of people. It's just that there's, we ripped the Band-Aid off. And so there's going to be a lot of pain, in the short term. But I think 5 years from now, when we've gotten through all this stuff and the economy is back to 2 or 3 years, we're going to look back and, there's going to be a lot of people that I hope are going to look back and go, I'm so glad I went online. Not I'm glad that this happened, but I'm glad that I was forced to move my teaching online, move my business online, whatever, because then it pays off much longer.
Super interesting you say it took you about 9 years, because earlier today I watched the newest Adam Neely video, the YouTube bass player guy, and he was like, I've been on YouTube for 14 years.
Yeah.
Crazy as fuck. So I mean, it's like, it's a decade's worth of work of the internet, really, is what you're saying. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's I don't take that lightly. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And there's, there's really no shortcuts. And
It's hard to do
what's
everything, the outreach. I think that's the biggest issue.
Yeah. And it's also just making the choice. Like, even though I knew I wanted to get to this point in my career, and this is what I want to do. I want to create videos. I want to have like a little, like conservatory online, basically. That's what my courses are.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get to that point, but I had to like keep paying the bills. I had my student loans to pay, I had rent and all that kind of stuff. So it was like, there's this long transition of just, every day just getting out the shovel and just shoveling dirt online and just trying to like, dig that hole as fast as I could and move that stuff. But then I still had to have my in-person students and my gigs and my university jobs to fund that transition. But it's funny because in the times of my life when I didn't go slow, when something happened and I had to like, the record scratches and it's like, oh, my whole life is different. It always turned out for the best. It's just that in the moment I was like, oh my God, like I had some like visa issues in 2011 when I was living in Brazil. And I was trying to stay longer and I thought I had done everything right. And it turns out the government had messed some stuff up with my visa application, which is not out of the ordinary in Brazil. And so I had flown from Brazil to England, to Manchester, to do a recording session for 5 days. And then I was supposed to fly back and live another 6 months in Brazil with my wife. And in like England, I was getting ready to go back to fly back. And I realized through talking to a friend and doing some research and stuff that like, I couldn't go back. Whoa. So I was actually, I'd gone there thinking it would just be for 5 days. It ended up being for 5 years.
Holy shit.
Because it was like, I couldn't go back. My guitar and everything is there. I rented a guitar for the recording and an amp and stuff because it was easier than flying it. My wife was there. My computer was there. All my clothes were there. Everything I owned was there. And so it was like, how do I figure this out? And it was crazy. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I'm sure a lot of people out there are feeling the same way now, where they just woke up one morning and all of a sudden they're, they couldn't go back to what they were doing.
Yeah. Well, and even their country. I mean.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, everyone's going through this right now, right? And so when I went through that, then that's when I was like, oh, okay. So at first I was like kind of panicking. I was like, I just lost my job teaching in Brazil. I have all these gigs booked. I mean, I was playing 3-4 nights a week, sometimes more. That was all gone. I had my, my students. I had my courses that I was teaching at these, schools. That was all gone. Basically, I went from like having a decent income to zero overnight.
Yeah.
And I had to start from scratch. But the cool thing was, it was like, well, I'm going to write my 30 Days to Better Jazz guitar book. I'm going to really push the Skype lessons. I'm going to just figure this out because I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And that really propelled me to get going on it and really do this kind of stuff full time. So, I sympathize with a lot of people who are like, like yourself, like you were saying, you're kind of going through this. A lot of other people are too, in other fields or music, whatever. But, I got through it then. I'm sure people will get through it now. Not everyone will. People will lose their jobs and not be able to go back to them. And that's terrible. I mean, that's not a fun thing for anybody. I'm hoping, and my hope for everyone is that they have a similar experience to what I did, which is I laid in bed one night panicking. And by the next morning I had gotten up and just said, well, I don't have a choice. I have to figure this out. I have to do something else. Yeah. And then, exactly. And then once I was forced to do it and I had no other choice, it was actually easier because it was like, well, I'm not looking at 4 things at once. It was like, oh, this is my only path forward right now. And so I have to do it,
That's my biggest downfall as a human being, I would say, is that I take on too many things at once. And
yeah, I used to do that too. And then now I'm much more focused, but it took a long time.
Yeah. Well, dude, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, sure, man. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah. So good luck with everything and let me know, just keep in touch and stuff. Yeah. But I mean, it sounds like you've done all the right things so far and you're using this time to be creative and productive and people can look at this time as like an ending, like, oh, my old life ended and I have to have a new life.
Yeah.
Or I think like what you're doing, what I did when I left Brazil or what I've done in other parts of my career is think of it as a transition. And yeah, transitions suck hard and they're very painful. And sometimes people don't survive them, their business goes under or their career ends or whatever, but there's always something else on the other side. And, I'm very lucky. I know I'm very lucky. I work really hard and I study hard and I do, I fail and I make mistakes and I learn from them. But I've always felt that like, when something like this has happened, when the record scratches and it's like, well, I can't do this. Happened before 4 or 5 times in my life when my life has been like, stop.
Yeah.
everything that you've done up until now, you're not doing it anymore. You have to do something else. And probably, yeah, 3 or 4 times I've had those major sort of transitions. And even though I thought like I'm doomed, I don't know how I'm going to survive this, I don't know how this is going to be, 5 years later, looking back, it's always been better. So my hope is that you and everyone else and people who, are going through this big transition will have that same experience, hopefully.
Well, thank you for the words of wisdom, and I will post this on YouTube and other places. But thank you, my dude. It was a pleasure, and I hope this is some insight to some people who are trying to get started doing what you're doing. So thank you.
For sure, man. Cool. Well, have a great day, man, and I'll see you soon. Take